Highlights from around the world. A celebration of the Millennium. This is ABC 2000. With Peter Jennings at ABC 2000 headquarters in Times Square, Barbara Walters in Paris, Diane Sawyer in New York, Charles Gibson in London, Cokie Roberts in Rome, Elizabeth Vargas in Sydney, Connie Chung in Las Vegas, Deborah Roberts in Orlando, Jack Ford in Times Square, Carol Simpson in Chicago, and Sam Donaldson at the Y2K Command Center in Washington. With our correspondents spanning the globe in Shanghai, Bombay, Bethlehem, Moscow, Havana, Rio de Janeiro, and across the U.S. reports from Miami, New Orleans, Tucson, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and in New York, Dick Clark counting down to the new year in Times Square.
Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings, and that is a moment in time from Times Square on New Year's Eve. We had a wonderful time as the 20th century gave way to the 21st. We had a very good time wherever we shared the world's Millennium celebrations. And I gather from all the reaction that millions of you had a good time, too. A contribution to peace, one viewer wrote me. Well, we hope. I'll never call it the boob tube again, wrote someone else, but she may. We were, and many of you clearly were, moved by being part of something very unusual in a global sense. It seemed like the barriers were down that day, and whether we were reminded of business left undone or the potential there is in the global community of man, we made this highlights tape to savor the memory of when the most interesting century ended and we set off into the new one. I really hope you enjoy it. If you were with us very early,
beginning a remarkable journey through time to celebrate the Millennium. This is BBC One at the start of the biggest live broadcast ever. 2000 Today is introduced by David Dimbleby.
Hello from Greenwich and welcome to BBC's One 2000 Today. Over the next 28 hours, as the Earth spins on its axis, we're going to be following the sun setting on the old millennium and rising on the new. And the clock here at Greenwich is already ticking away the final minutes and seconds to the new century. 14 hours, 44 minutes, 22, 21, 20 seconds and counting. And we're here at Greenwich because this is the universally acknowledged home of time. It's based on this line, an imaginary line, but actually you can see it on the pavement here, 0 degrees longitude, where east meets west. In international law, the new year 2000 doesn't actually officially begin until it begins here, which doesn't, of course, mean other places don't celebrate it at their own midnights, far from it. In only 3/4 of an hour from now, the tiny uninhabited Millennium Island at the east of Kiribati in the Pacific, over 8,000 miles away from here, is going to be the first to say goodbye 1999 and a few hours later to welcome the first sunrise of the year 2000. We're going to be there as BBC One joins 60 other countries, all celebrating the dawn of a new century. Our journey is going to take us from Beijing to Moscow, from Sydney to Los Angeles. We're going to be in India, in South America, in Africa, Australasia. We're going to be in Antarctica. And of course, here in these islands. We'll see Britons from the North Sea to the Atlantic Ocean as they take part in all the reunions, the parties, the celebrations, and the commemorations of the past 100 years. And as midnight approaches, we're going to be over there, down at the Millennium Dome. The Queen will be arriving there by river after lighting a Millennium beacon. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prime Minister will be there too, as with 12,000 guests, if they all get their tickets in time, they join the countdown and the music and the partying that leads up to midnight. And as Big Ben strikes 12, a spectacular river of fire will streak up the Thames from Tower Bridge to Westminster, moving at nearly 700 miles an hour. The speed the Earth itself turns and the time moves across the globe. And that's only the start of it. There's lots more. And to hear about it, we join Michael Parkinson in the 2000 Today studio. Michael.
David, thank you. Welcome to BBC Television Centre here in London for 2000 Today. This is the last programme on BBC One before the start of the year 2000. And when we go off the air tomorrow afternoon, we'll be halfway into the first day of the next 1,000 years. 2000 Today is the biggest and the most ambitious television programme ever made, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There are celebrations going on all around the world, all at different times, and we are going to be there. Over 60 countries are taking part. We estimate that we'll have an audience worldwide of over 1 billion people. We'll be starting in the tiny, uninhabited South Pacific island of Kiribati, where it'll be midnight in just under an hour when it's 10 o'clock here. And we'll finish 28 hours later in Samoa. We'll be seeing the setting of the sun and its rising across the world as 1999 becomes 2000. Quite simply, we'll witness the sun set on one millennium and rise on another right across this planet of ours. Now, in the studio with me, because I'm not doing all this by myself, of course, is Gabby Roslin. Gabby, good morning.
Good morning.
Big day.
Big day, raring to go.
And for you too, of course, you're going to do the silly thing and stay in the studio for the entire 30 hours.
Yes, I've got a rolled up little sleeping bag under here that nobody can see.
What are you going to do, catnap?
Under the table.
Peter Sissons is with us too, of course. A big day ahead, Peter.
Oh, the biggest global party you or I will ever see or report on. Huge potential for unpredictable events. Much of it is predictable as the sun shadow sweeps across the earth. But unpredictability at this time of the year is par for the course. Big news event.
You will remember that our coverage began at Kiribati in the Pacific. Kiribati, as you can see, moved the international date line about a year ago to include all of the islands in the island nation. But something they must clearly have had in mind was the Millennium, because they called the small island on which this ceremony this morning is taking place Millennium Island.
My dear child, take this torch of peace and hope from Kiribati, so that it may light the whole world.
Here's ABC's Bob Brown.
The old man and the boy set out to sea, while dancers on the shore of Millennium Island chanted a goodbye to the pain of the past in a traditional ceremony of good luck. This theme of passing the torch and beginning a voyage of adventure would set the tone for the coming day, with many a midnight left to come and many a port to explore. The Kingdom of Tonga had declared itself on daylight saving time in order to compete with Kiribati for the first celebration of the Millennium, here with a rendition of the Hallelujah Chorus. In Perth, Australia, where the hour of midnight was fast approaching, there were celebrations to watch the last sunset of the second millennium. Even in places with hours to go before midnight, crowds were beginning to gather. In New York's Times Square, people watched officials hoist the crystal ball that would be dropped to greet the millennium. In Sydney, Australia, lanterns representing sea creatures floated in the harbor. And in one of the world's great landmarks, the Sydney Opera House, dancers cavorted across the western facade of the curved roof. If there were notes of caution remaining in the air, it was because midnight had not yet visited the first major city where the possible impact of the Millennium Bug on the world's computers would be tested.
Here it comes. I can feel it, ladies and gentlemen.
That would happen in New Zealand.
With one of the people who's with us in New Zealand this morning, along with James Walker, is Susie Aiken, who's a reporter for TVNZ, as they call it. We say Z, but TVNZ, Television New Zealand. Can you hear me, Susie?
Yes, I can. Good morning, Peter.
How
Good
excited are you people there?
Well, in the last half hour, I've really felt the energy level and the ambience around me, and the boat horns, as you can hear. We've got 68 super yachts in this purpose-built America's Cup harbour behind me. A concert going on. New Zealanders are out to party, and we are counting down the minutes. We've got 3 minutes to go, and it's hard not to get completely caught up. It's exciting to be the first major city to see this in.
Do you think that's a feeling that's held throughout New Zealand? It's not a very big place.
It's not a very big place, but we've got about 3.8 million people, but a very strong voice globally, we hope. And we're really looking forward to this new millennium with a very positive accent for us is to aim to preserve the planet. So that's, I think, where our mission will be in the next years ahead.
Lovely to have you with us, Susie. Let's listen to the official ceremony itself.
For a minute. If the last 2,000 years are worth anything, it's because we can learn from them. Just for a second, what legacy you will give to the future. Take a look at each other, say goodbye and get ready to say hello. 10, 9, 8, 7,
Let's go to Wellington, New Zealand, on the southern part of the North Island, to ABC's Jimmy Walker, who is there just outside the New Zealand Parliament at a place called the National Incident Monitoring Centre, looking to see what, if any, Y2K problems, James, there are at this time of day.
Peter, first I've got to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. That's right. You're the first among us.
And second, let there be light, and there is light behind us. The electricity, at least here in Wellington, we've had no reports about any problems anywhere else in the country, is A-OK. Now, we were told that the analog cell phone service is overloaded. But that happens, as we all know, on Mother's Day and on Easter and Christmas, and everybody was asked, please, not to pick up those phones all at once at 12:01.
They did.
And they did, and right now it's overloaded. I can also show this to you. This is a receipt from the National Bank here in Wellington. This is an ATM receipt for, let me think, it's dated 1100, and the time on it is 3 seconds into the new year. Peter?
Okay, Jimmy, thanks very much. We have a lot of very valuable colleagues waiting at their posts around the world, so we're just going to move around the world a little bit now and see what they have on offer. First to London, ABC's Charlie Gibson. Charlie.
Millions of people will be singing Auld Lang Syne when the midnight hour comes, and while that is a very American tradition, it is something that began here, as so many traditions do, in Great Britain.
It feels as if it's always been there. No matter what the year, no matter where the festivities, there is that song. But for the song's origins, you have to go to the Green Hills of Western Scotland. That is the home of the poet Robert Burns, who was the first one to write down the lyrics to an old Scottish folk song more than 200 years ago.
He was gathering old songs, and he knew this song had never been actually written down before, and Burns had got the melody from an old man he heard singing.
He tidied up the words, added some verses of his own, and not content with the song's original melody, he found one more to his liking. Another well-known Scottish tune of the time. Burns' Auld Lang Syne grew in popularity, particularly after his death in 1796, and soon became the traditional Scottish song of parting.
Auld Lang Syne, which literally translated means for old time's sake. And we're going to gather again, meet up for Auld Lang Syne, old time's sake.
As Scots emigrated around the world in the last century, they took the song with them, including to Canada. There it was heard by the man who would make it a part of New Year's Eve.
And now, here is Mr. New Year's Eve himself, Guy Lombardo.
From the stage of the Grill Room at New York's Roosevelt Hotel, Lombardo and his Royal Canadians made Auld Lang Syne a New Year's Eve standard. They played it there for the first time in 1929 and continued for decades afterwards, making it their signature song. A tradition was born.
Happy New Year, everybody. A very happy New Year.
So, Peter, when the ball drops tonight and you have a little glass of the bubbly and you kiss your favorite person, A little thanks to Bobby Burns up in Scotland for bringing us Auld Lang Syne.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Look forward to talking to you many times throughout the day. 39 opportunities there are to celebrate the New Year's. If you like the 39 different time zones in the world, we're going to cross a lot of them. Let us now go to Paris, where ABC's Barbara Walters is sitting just across the Seine from the Eiffel Tower. Barbara.
Indeed we are, Peter, and when we heard Charlie a few moments ago talking about that bubbly you're going to be drinking at midnight, just remember that bubbly, that champagne comes here from France. For 1,000 days now, they have been announcing the days. Now they are announcing the hours, and eventually 3 minutes before midnight, it will be the minutes and then the seconds. You can see the base of the Eiffel Tower where there are going to be enormous fireworks going up 1,000 feet to the top of the Eiffel Tower. There you see it says J for jour, which had been the day. It's 11 hours now until midnight. And the Eiffel Tower, the top of it, is still shrouded in fog. It's been quite rainy. Today is the first day that it isn't raining. People are already lined up, Peter, even though it's 11 hours away, and it's supposed to be the most glittering. 20,000 bulbs. They have 12 Ferris wheels just for today, each one with a different theme, from cows and monkeys to acrobats and an internet. And here the main event is indeed the Eiffel Tower, with the countdown and the fireworks and the 20,000 bulbs and the Ferris wheels and ooh la la, as we say here.
We'll make you work on a lot of other things between now and then, Barbara. Thanks so much. A lot of people here looking quite envious at the thought of being in Paris. I think it must be the parties. But the big celebration now is about to come up in Australia. So let's go there just a few minutes before their midnight, down to Sydney, Australia, and Elizabeth Fargus.
Greetings, Peter. As you can see, Sydney Harbour and the Sydney Opera House lit up and ready to go. The biggest party, they say, in Australian history. It's been in the planning for years. The biggest fireworks display, 20 tons of them, about to be launched in just a matter of minutes, as I said, as Australia begins to herald in the second millennium, the oldest continent on Earth, ready to welcome in the second millennium. The 2000 Olympics are here this year, probably the biggest Olympic Games they claim to be ever. It's, in addition, going to be celebrating its own centenary in 1 year, the founding of its own federation of states. So Australia as a whole is looking forward to overcoming what it calls the tyranny of distance and joining sort of other world powers on the global stage. They are into the final countdown, as you can hear, Peter, and about ready to launch all those fireworks. It should be spectacular. Listen to them count it down.
That's Sydney Harbour Bridge there. This large, dry, fascinating place. So far, for so long from everywhere else, and now, thanks to technology, so much closer to the rest of the world, and now much more of an Asian nation than it ever has been in the past. We were talking a little bit earlier about how people in the Pacific were jostling with one another to be the first nations into the 21st century. Whenever we have a complicated question here, we turn to Robert Krulwich. I wonder how come all of those Asian nations, those Pacific nations, get to celebrate first and we have to wait 15 or 16 hours?
Yeah, good question. I asked myself the same question. It turns out the answer is about 115 years old. In Washington, D.C., in the 1880s, 25 nations got together to figure out where a day on Earth should begin. And they were looking for an empty place. The emptiest place you could find, of course, is the Pacific Ocean. So they chose this line right here. This is the 180th meridian. It is almost empty, except for here. These are a bunch of Siberians. And here, this is the little island nation of Fiji. So let me just change slides, and I'll show you the problem here. The line that they chose originally ran right through Fiji. Now, let me show you what the practical difficulties of that are. Next slide. You wake up one morning, let's make it a Monday morning in Fiji, you're whistling and you think, okay, I'm ready to go to work. But just possibly the International Date Line, this is conceivable, could run right through your home. So you walk in to have breakfast, it's 8 a.m. on Sunday. Now, no normal human being can contain this kind of a contradiction. So next slide, let's take a look at the International Date Line, the way it was reconceived. They just moved around people. Well, that's fine, except, of course, once you make an exception for somebody, you have to make an exception for the next guy who asked. And the next guy who asked was recently the head of the island nation of Kiribati. let's take a look at the nation of Kiribati. You see here it spans to the date line. So part of Kiribati is on one day and part of Kiribati is on the other day. So the president of Kiribati said, look, I want my whole nation to have one time together. And so he unilaterally pushed the international date line 2 hours into 1999. And then to clinch it, he chose to name, as we've said all morning, the easternmost spot Millennium Island, I guess hoping to attract...
There's that beach they were dancing on this morning.
Yes, they got us.
Right.
All right, so you can't argue. But look what it means. It means that this president stuck the year 2000 deep in, 2 hours into 1999. He sort of thrust time 2 hours backwards. Or if you like, he extended the 21st century 2 extra hours and shortened the 20th century by 2. And he can do that because, after all, it's just time. The nations around his country said, he can't do that. Stop him. And they went to the UN, and the UN said, and this is a general principle for the whole day, time is your business. We don't fight wars over it. It's not a law. It's a gentleman's agreement, and this gentleman did his deed.
And this is why Fiji and Tonga and New Zealand and Kiribati jostled, as I said, each other for so long, because I think everybody thought they'd make money out of it.
And indeed, I bet you that Kiribati has made a little pile.
Thanks, Robert. That's great. We're at the New York Stock Exchange to witness an historic moment. The floor of the New York Stock Exchange, which will change dramatically in the 7th century, welcomes Muhammad Ali. He's there to ring the bell, by many accounts, the athlete of the century. He's there to ring the bell for the last time this century. He's there to be admired by so many people who admire him in every corner of the globe. He's there with his wife and his daughter, his wife Lonnie. We're at the New York Stock Exchange to hear the bell ring. As we look around the world, including at the Globe here in New York, the ball that will drop at midnight tonight, there's so much to celebrate. In the last 40 years, as we see people on these streets, we realize that life expectancy has risen in this period of time to a greater degree than all of human history. And what would a Millennium celebration be without thinking of and considering the children of the 6 billion people on Earth at the moment? 2.2 billion of them are under 18. And 2 billion of them, we're sad to say, live in developing countries against great struggle. So when we go down to Epcot in Florida at the moment to see Deborah Roberts and to hear from some kids down there, it's a reminder of how lucky in America we are. Deborah?
That's right, Peter. In fact, this morning, Walt Disney World will kick off its festivities by doing what Disney does best, and that is celebrating children. This morning, we're going to hear the angelic voices of 70 children from a 250-person choir from the Central Florida Performing Arts School. They range in age from 3 to 16, the entire choir does. And this morning, they're going to perform a song that was actually suggested by First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. It is entitled, appropriately, Millennium.
So much can change in the span of 1,000 years, while some things in the heart remain the same. 100 generations, the rise and fall of nations, the winding path of life has brought us all here to this place. As we walk onward to the new millennium, heaven help us to be strong enough to do what's right for each and everyone, one day at a time. With your hand holding mine, we can realize each dream in every mind and go beyond the and go beyond
ABC's Mark Litkey is in Shanghai to us, which in many ways, Mark, you're on the Bund, I know, overlooking the river, but in some parts of Shanghai it looks like Times Square.
I tell you, Peter, it feels like 1.2 billion people have been waiting for you here.
You talked about a sense of awe at the beginning of the broadcast. Well, welcome to awe-inspiring Chinese style.
It's night there on the banks of the Huangpo River, so I know it's difficult for you to turn to your, I guess, left and look at the new modern cities across the river, but can you give us any sense of the contrast from where you are on the Bund to the other side?
What was just behind me was the old traditional Bund of the colonial powers, built by the British in the 20s, and right across the river, which you may be seeing now, is the future. This is the China this is the image that China is desperate to project to the world. So much of what's happening in China today has to do with pride and trying to live down centuries of humiliation. China is desperate to prove to the world that it is a prosperous, self-confident, powerful nation worthy of respect. Hence all this modernity across the river, which 10 years ago was a rice field. I think you know when you were visiting here not long ago, Peter, you were up in some of those buildings which were just scaffolding. Now they're all completed.
Too high for me. Mark Litkey is our chief Asian correspondent. So thanks, Mark, very much for continuing to take the measure of time around the world. Sometimes it goes very slowly, sometimes it goes very quickly. And it's really fascinating to watch how the people who celebrated Times Square 2000 have kept up. All those pieces of pink confetti were designed to be the equivalent of cherry blossoms as they floated down on Times Square. They've got something for almost every country around the world that's been celebrating. Immediately below us are all these extraordinary parasols. Good morning, everybody. Down there, Diane Sawyer, who's in Times Square. I understand completely why you get so much energy working here.
Peter, good morning. Diane and I are here. We can barely hear, but I suspect you were saying hi to us down here.
I was.
What's happening, as you mentioned, is as part of the festivities here, a number of things are taking place. One is that Diane's wearing very cool glasses here. Friends here like Diane's glasses. But the other thing that's taking place here is that each time we show another midnight segment in our big screen up there, everybody sort of buys into the celebration. We heard them counting down for Japan just a few moments ago, and then an explosion that will rival, I think, what you're going to hear at midnight around it.
You've got to know, too, these people swear you're going to be here at midnight. Yeah. You're not going to. So I've been compiling a kind of survival guide. How do you do that? And it turns out the first thing you have to do when you come to Times Square is express yourself. Now, didn't you wake up this morning, Peter, and say, I think I'll put Jell-O in my hair and some sparkle? Look at this. We have a multitude of it. We have people, how many layers of jeans? Two layers of jeans. People are wearing 6 and 7 layers of clothes, and they have cereal boxes stuffed down into their clothes.
Well, these guys have been here since we've been out here for at least 2 or 3 hours now. We're still, 14 hours away, but they promised they're going to be here tonight.
Well, anyway, Peter, I just have to tell you that I asked them all what they're going to do in the Millennium, and they all said, to a person, find a restroom, okay?
That's terrific. Right, Diane Sawyer and Jack Ford on New York's Village Green. Not all celebrations today have been as raucous as the one in Times Square. Here's ABC's Bob Brown.
This celebration, featuring South Korea's national music troupe in Seoul, was also notable for what was unseen. In the demilitarized zone, where no photograph signs were posted, many Koreans went to hang messages on barbed wire, hoping for peace with the North. God, please let these reunions happen, said one note. In Indonesia, on the island of Java, a dance portrayed the law of karma at Borobudur, the largest Buddhist monument in the world, built late in the first millennium. And in a simple gesture that spoke volumes about change in the 20th century, South Africa's Nelson Mandela attended a ceremony in his old prison cell on Robben Island, where he spent 18 of his 26 years in prison for fighting apartheid before becoming president of South Africa. Mandela passed a flame of reconciliation on to the country's new president, Thabo Mbeki, who then passed it on to the children. Even at the end of the Earth, they staged a ceremony, measuring a new location for the South Pole marker because of shifts in the ice. You could see the row of old markers as they prepared for their own celebration.
This is quite a privilege, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a very important event. Occurs every year to set a new marker at the location of the pole on the 1st of January.
Okay, now, there's something very interesting about this pole. It's got a wonderful plaque on top, hasn't it?
This is a specially made marker here at the South Pole. It's been a tradition for the past 6 years.
Okay, and what does it say?
And it says it's very unique in that in its design, representing uniqueness about being at this location of the South Pole.
Okay, Larry, shall we do the business? Take over with the ceremony.
Yes. I'm now placing this marker at the location of the South Pole on this day, January 1st, 2000. We wish everyone, all members of the scientific community and the Antarctic support people in the Antarctic program, and everybody who's watching this, all the viewers, a very happy New Year's, happy century, and happy millennium.
Okay, that's the ceremony done. Let's party!
You see the people in the background there who've got on tuxedo or dinner jackets at the South Pole. We're very pleased that Dr. Neil Tyson, as I said, one of the world's great astrophysicists and the director of the Hayden Planetarium, got through here today.
Yeah.
Watching that stuff from the Antarctic is fascinating. Tell us again, nice and clearly, because no one does it better, why they move the pole.
That pole is not stuck in the ground. It's stuck in a glacial sheet. And glaciers move, as that's what they love to do. And over time, over the year, the glacier moves the pole that they inserted a year ago away from where it's supposed to be, so then they just replant it.
It's very dramatic to see that long line of poles going up for the last several years. When you talk about millennium, you sure mean something different than most of us.
Well, millennium is such a small slice of time in the spectrum of the universe. We've got the Big Bang happening 13 billion years ago. You know, what's 1,000 years between friends? Much has happened in the universe since then, and I and my colleagues spent our careers studying the evolution of phenomena throughout that time.
We managed to get a visual representation of the Big Bang here. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Oh, certainly. All evidence points to the fact that the entire universe began as a single point of very high density that then exploded and brought forth all matter and energy into existence, out of which galaxies, planets, stars, and people were formed. And so what you have...
This is happening, what we're looking at, over millions of years?
Yeah, well, actually, a lot happened in even the first few minutes. And we can trace our laws of physics that far back. And there's a point where our laws of physics break down. We've got people working on that.
Right.
But most of the universe we are familiar with is long after all of the real excitement took place in the early universe.
Well, they fixed the Hubble telescope again today, or the other day rather, which is very exciting for us to watch the astronauts work. What's that going to mean? Are we going to be able to see even farther into the future, or are we going to get to see things we've already know about?
Well, it's both. We get to see more of what we know to sharpen our understanding of the universe, but also there are always new discoveries in the universe. Practically any time you point the Hubble telescope anywhere, there are elements of the universe that are revealed to us. Right now, the Hubble Deep Field remains one of the most significant images we have of the universe because it's a sight line that goes from where we are here on Earth all the way out to the farthest reaches of the universe. And there are galaxies nearby, galaxies far away, and these galaxies hail from a time when the universe was much younger. And so in a way, it's a timeline of the 13 billion years of cosmic time.
Now, I know the answer to this already, but I'm always fascinated, so I'm going to be your prop man. Tell us where man fits into this timeline and how much space do we occupy?
Well, the timeline that we create is about the length of a football field wrapped around. And as you march your way down this ramp, you see chronicled at a rate of about 3.7 million years per inch the history of the world. 2/3 of the way down, you pass the formation of the solar system, and at the end of the ramp, the thickness of hair on the sheet that you're holding up, the thickness of that strand of hair represents all of cultural history of human beings on Earth in time, from cave paintings to the present. And so you ask, where does a millennium fit? It's 1/30th of the width of that strand of hair.
That's absolutely extraordinary. So man's contribution to time all goes in to a period or a space the width of that here?
On a timeline stretch, just the length of a football field.
No one in the country explains science more clearly and more eloquently than you do. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Dr. Neil Tyson from the Hayden Planetarium, which is soon to become the Rose Hayden Planetarium.
The Rose Center for Earth and Space, opening in February.
We take you to the future. Again, Shanghai, as I said, to the most populous nation in the world, though a country slightly smaller than the United States. And our Mark Littke, our chief Asia correspondent, is there.
In many ways, this is China's way of reminding the world that this is not a millennium celebration for China. This is a 5 millennium celebration for China. This is 5,000 years of continuous history. 5,000 years in which China was at one time the greatest civilization on the planet. In the year 999, the Sung Dynasty, China was the greatest civilization. It was a time of great scientific and artistic achievement. The invention of paper and printing and gunpowder and the compass. And all these years later, China, in some way, is trying to tell the world we need to capture that lost glory. So celebrating the millennium is a way to stick its chest out a little bit and say, we can do you 3 millennia better.
And here, as always, is the official party led by the President of the People's Republic of China and Jiang Zemin, who's going to come here and mark the new century. China, as I guess most people know, produces most of the world's fireworks, so they've got to be very happy in that respect today.
This is still a country where people take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but beyond that caution, there was an optimism that China has turned a corner in recent years, that the future is brighter than anything they, their relatives, their ancestors have ever known.
Thank you, Mark Littke, our chief Asia correspondent. Take a look. Early evening at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, in the Vatican City, to be much more precise. And one of the reasons we asked ABC's Cokie Roberts to go to the Vatican was because she has friends in high places. Cokie?
Well, I have relatives in high places, Peter. My mother, Lindy Boggs, is with me here, I'm happy to say. Mama is, for those of you who don't know, the United States ambassador to the Holy See. Mom, this spot where we're sitting has seen several millennia now come in. And I'm not saying you have, but you've seen a lot of this century without giving away your age. And the passage of time is part of what the Pope will be talking about. But do you want to reflect for just a second about the passage of this century?
Well, the passage of this century to me is something that's very special, mostly because I have so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And I've been associated with, of course, the government of the United States, either from my family or myself, for so many years. And now to have you and other members of the family who are able to express what our country is all about, what world peace is all about, and what this celebration is all about is just absolutely marvelous.
And the Pope will be talking about how human beings are the only creatures who know about the passage of time. We only have a few seconds, but what do you think about that?
I think that he knows so much about the passage of time, and I think he's so hopeful for the future and is such an inspiration to young people.
Thank you, Mommy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, beautiful.
Back to you, Peter, in New York.
Thank you very much, Cokie. Very touching. I can't remember when anybody cut their mother off like that before. Very great politeness, or called a subject Mommy. At the famous Gewandhaus with the famous Gewandhaus Orchestra in Leipzig, which used to be East Germany and now is Germany again. They are playing Beethoven's and singing Beethoven's and acting Beethoven's Ode to Joy. We take you now to India, to ABC's Lynn Sher, who's in Bombay, where they are just minutes away from celebrating the Millennium in what is going to very soon become probably the world's most populous nation. Lynn.
Peter, the party began several hours ago. It is a huge crowd. It is noisy. It is very friendly. They're lined up here waiting for the fireworks. As soon as it's 12 o'clock, there's a barge out there that the Taj Mahal Hotel, which is right here, world-famous hotel, has supplied. It's going to greet the folks, and then there are going to be huge fireworks. This, by the way, is a subdued crowd. This country is officially in mourning for the death of the late president, Sharma. But take a look, not very subdued. Lots of other parties going on around India. Down the beach in Goa, huge international party. Palaces in Rajasthan. But right here we have the folks out in the public square waiting to celebrate. Peter?
Well, Lynn, this is now a nuclear nation as well, and as we said, about to become the world's most populous nation, perhaps sometimes in the next 50, the world's largest parliamentary democracy. There must be a tremendous sense of confidence there in many respects tonight.
You know, there is great hope and a lot of wishes here, but interestingly, wishes for ordinary things. The newspaper asked people what their wild wishes were. They said they want water to come out of the taps. They want people to be fed. A very sobering thought, even at an exciting moment like this.
And so India passes into the new millennium as well. This country that really had its greatest midnight only a couple of years ago when it celebrated its independence. 50 years ago, in 1948, the War of Independence, which led to partition between India and Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh. Lynn, this is your first visit to India. I want to know what your most powerful impression is.
The answer is the number of people. It's staggering. It's so hard to wrap your mind around the fact that there are this many people almost everywhere, Peter. This country adds 20 million people a year. That's the size of Australia. 50,000 new babies a day. You see it in the cities. You see it in the countryside. This is a very, very large train to start to turn around. It's happening, but it's going to take a while. Peter?
Okay, Lynn, thanks very much for a wonderful job in India. What a place to celebrate the new millennium, looking at the past and the future. In terms of population, I want to talk just a little bit with someone who's a student of population, and we're now talking about population growth in very dramatic ways. Ken Dykewald in San Francisco, who's the author of How the 21st Century Will Be Ruled by the New Old. You're a baby boomer, I can tell by looking at you. As you see us going around the world today, Ken, and looking at the exploding population in some places, it must give you shivers in some respects.
Well, yes, it does. Just to imagine the idea of 20 million births per year in India, which is 5 times the number of births than there were during our great baby boom after World War II. But as you know, what I find particularly interesting is not just the number of babies being born, but how many of us will be living longer and longer and even longer in the 21st century.
So as a demographer in some respects, what do you think it's going to look like by 2050?
Well, Peter, with regard to longevity, let's keep in mind that throughout 99% of human history, the average life expectation worldwide was less than 18 years. The truth of it is, in the past, most people didn't age. We all died very young. In the 19th and 20th centuries, we've seen extraordinary advances in medicine and pharmacy and public health, which have begun to give us all somewhat of a taste of a long life. But the real longevity revolution, the real fireworks are just about to occur. I think there's a very strong likelihood that by the middle of this new century, average life expectancy in the industrialized worlds will have lifted up to somewhere between 90 and 100. And I think people living to 120 or 150 will become commonplace. Which
raises all sorts of potential burdens. The United Nations tells us we'll spend more time caring for our parents than for our children in this century.
Right, and the parents that will be cared for at the end of the day will be us. One of the hardest things for people in our age group to consider is that when we think of the new old, those people living 80 or 100 or 150 years in this new century, this will not be our mom and dad's generation necessarily. This will be ours. We will be the people living these long lives, going back to school at 70, late blooming at 90, learning new technologies and new careers at 100. And I was even reflecting, Peter, that if you and I are still around, we might be doing this show 100 years from now with a little more gray in our hairs.
Well, you might be doing it. Ken, thank you very much. Ken Dykewald. There are these wonderful crowds in Times Square which have given this place absolutely tremendous sense of block to block to block enthusiasm, because as the rest of the world has celebrated, the Times 2000 group here has celebrated right along with them. And as we count down in various parts of the world, we have had the people in Times Square counting down with us as well. Charlie Gibson is in London. Charlie?
Peter, as I have watched you now for almost 9 hours, you know, I think broadcasters get somewhat jaded about what we can do in terms of linking parts of the world. But this is really the most extraordinary example I've ever seen of putting together literally the global village as you've gone from the remote islands in the South Pacific through Japan, China, India just a few moments ago. These linkages are so important, and the expressions of hope that we have seen from every country so important. I mention all of this because there was a very important linkage just a few moments ago, actually put together by the BBC and RTE, which is the Irish broadcasting system, in the center of Derry, Londonderry, the embattled town of Northern Ireland. There were 100,000 people gathered, 2,000 singers, linked symbolically and literally with Dublin, where the 3 Irish tenors and a female soloist as well were singing in front of a crowd of 20,000, and they sang the haunting Irish melody, Danny Boy. And Catholics singing together, and it is such a sign of hopefulness in Ireland, where maybe there is now a chance for peace, given the efforts of so many in the north, in the south, Senator Mitchell from the United States among others. Maybe there's a chance for peace, and that linkage, very symbolic of it. Singers in Derry and singers in Dublin united in song. Peter?
Thanks, Charlie. The Derry air, from the siege of Derry in 1689 to now, to the end of the Troubles. Long, long time. And very moving. Some people I know could listen to that song all day and probably all night. Let's check the first sunrise in Sydney, Australia. We did ask ABC's Aaron Brown to try to compile some of the century's firsts. Here's what he's got.
Firsts seem to matter a lot on a day like this, so here are a few. Sandwiched in between the first Millennium celebration and the first spectacular fireworks display, you might have missed the first wedding. 467 miles off the coast of New Zealand, Chatham Islands, Monique Kroon, who runs a hardware store there, married Dean Baird. Not long after, the first baby was born. We believe this is actually the first girl baby born, a New Zealander. The shots of the first boy baby born are apparently caught up in the first traffic jam of the new century. The first attempt to defy death took some rehearsal, but when midnight struck, the cord was ready, the jumper was ready, and so were the record books. And while much of the world celebrated in traditional costumes with customs that go back centuries, Philadelphia began its day's celebrations in sweats, running up the steps of the Art Museum, a tradition that dates back to the first Rocky movie back in the late 70s. And while none of these events may be as spectacular as this one, don't try telling that to them or to her.
This is how they're celebrating in Warsaw, the Polish capital. The theme of this performance is hope. Of all the countries in Eastern Europe, Poland has probably done as well as any, in many cases better, since the end of communism. It all began with solidarity. There you see the old castle in the background. Not much left after World War II. We're in the Royal Palace at Stockholm in Sweden, and many of you, especially those of you who are younger, will recognize a Swedish star here, there, and everywhere, Robin. The King and Queen of Sweden have decided to give this party in the Royal Palace, a 300-year-old Royal Palace right in the center of Stockholm. Sits even on a couple of other castles that were there before it. Robin.
Show me light. Baby, show me what it's all about, baby. You're the one that I ever needed. Show me what it's all
Well, in Sweden so far, they have been more dressed up than anybody else we have seen so far in the world. I think that is Victoria, the Crown Princess of Sweden, the heir to the throne there, home on vacation from her studies at Yale University in the United States. So many people in this new century still increasingly coming to America from around the world, particularly for their advanced education. Let's go to Vatican City and to ABC's Cokie Roberts. Cokie, what has the Pope's day been like today? He is, after all, so old and so frail.
Well, he actually was looking pretty good earlier today, Peter, looking ruddy and healthy. He's just had an absolutely beautiful Vesper service here at St. Peter's, where he gave a message about mankind being the only creature that understands about the passing of time, and said we can write our own histories, and warned about writing a history for the next century where technology should work to benefit humans, not to hurt them. Pope will come out again at midnight at the traditional spot at his window to give another message. But before that, there will be rock music here in St. Peter's Square, something called Hot Music, an Italian heartthrob, Claudio Baglioni, and Queen Esther Marrow from Harlem will be here, which means you gotta love Italy, Peter. This is a country where you can do anything like that. And I think a year without Italy is a very bad year indeed. And I want to show you something we've put together from A to Z. It's the best country on earth. Angelo, Arno, the river, Antipasto, Armani, Giorgio Armani, Alps, artichokes, and then there's Botticelli, Bellini, Bernini, Bacci, and Bacci. It's hard to argue with Cafe Espresso, Cappuccino, Cupids, crucifixes, cardinals. Or take David, Dante, Donatello, Della Robbia, Del Sarto, Da Vinci, Dolce. Delicious. Etna, Ekberg in La Dolce Vita. fantastico. We have focaccia, formaggio, fagioli, fettuccine, fellini. Florence, frescoes, fountains. What about ghirlandaio, gondolas, Giotto, Giardino, Gucci? Hadrian's Villa, Hotel Hassler, or simply Italia, indubitably, indisputably incredible. Not convinced? How about Julius Caesar? The Coffee House de Boboli, Lippi, Loggia, Leaning Tower, and
Sophia Loren.
Madonna, the original, Milan. Then there's the Nativity, Naples, Neo-Realism. Organ, opera, leads to Pavarotti, leads to P. Brace yourselves, we've got Perugino, Pappardelle, Pellegrino, pizza. We've got Piazza, Pesto, Parmesan, the Pope. And let's not forget prosciutto, prosecco, Ponte Vecchio. Quiet chapels. Then there's ricotta, risotto, Rossellini, Rossini, Raphael, Rome. The stupendous San Marco, Santa Croce, Savonarola, Swiss Guards in St. Peter's, Sicily. Turin, Titian, tiramisu, also temples, tapestries, Tomba. Umbrella Pines, Umbria, Uffizi, the museum. You're listening to Vivaldi. Venice, Verona, Vangale, Vino. Everybody in Italy drinks vino. Versace. White truffles, wet cobblestones. Scusi, there's no X in Italian. How about another S? Siena. And oh yes, yellow peppers, youth hostels, young lovers. Last but not least, Zuccari Brothers, Zuccari Palace, Zucchini, Italy. We rest our case.
Oh, Cokie, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I didn't know. Well, Charlie, hang on a second. We may give you a chance in just a moment.
He can't possibly be saying England is more fun than Italy.
Well, you never know, lassie. You never know.
Is he going to tell us? Is he going to go to mashed potatoes?
Cokie, that was spectacular. Thank you very much. Charlie, you want to go? You want to have a go at this?
I would say, first of all, I'm amazed that she's been working on her accent that hard. But I would say, like her cobblestones, she is all wet. Like that Tower of Pisa, she is not quite on the level. And I think she has been drinking too much of the vino since she's been in Italy.
Not today, unfortunately.
Let's go to Paris. Barbara Walters, you want to argue for France being the best country in the world under these circumstances?
Well, okay, Cokie, okay. You know, we could also do the alphabet A to Z. I made a few notes while we were talking about France. I mean, A, we could start with the Arc de Triomphe, the largest triumphal arch in the world, commissioned by Napoleon, perhaps the most famous general in the world. It's also where another famous general, Charles de Gaulle, walked through that arch when Paris was liberated from the Germans in August of 1944. Hey, Cokie, let me keep going, and then I'll give you time to rebut me. Let's just forget the alphabet. Let's just talk facts. France has more tourists than any other country in the world. 70 million tourists came here last year. That's 10 million more than the actual people who live in France, so it must have something going here. Paris is the city of romance. No one will argue with that. Just think, Cokie, there are 50 different songs in English written about Paris. April in Paris, the last time I saw Paris. Paris in the spring, I love Paris. What do you have, Valari? Let's keep going. Frenchmen are the subtlest and the sexiest. What about Brigitte Bardot, the sex kitten? And Catherine Deneuve, still magnificent in her late 40s. The whole world copies French food. The whole world copies French styles. Dior, Chanel, Balmain, Saint Laurent, their names known all over the world. The greatest wines are not from Italy, but from France. Real champagne is produced only in France. And the Eiffel Tower, of course, is the most famous landmark in all of Europe. You are going to see fireworks like you have never seen, and 20,000 lights. The whole city is a glitter. Paris is the most beautiful city in the world. And finally, Cokie, most married men in Italy call their wives Mama. married men in France call their wives and others chérie. And vive la France!
Let's give the last
Oh,
Europe.
Peter, you better put an end to this, or we could go on and on, Peter.
I have a feeling. So let's go to Great Britain. Emphasis on the word great, and leave it to Charlie. Charlie.
Absolutely. I mean, what's Cokie doing? She's talking about food and wine from Italy. Sure, they're fine. I can't defend the British food. Barbara's defending France as the center of sex. What do we have from Great Britain? It gave the world democracy. Let's have a rundown of what this great country has to offer.
As much as this place has stayed the same, it has changed. In this island nation, the most popular dish is no longer fish and chips, but curry. The national sport is still cricket, but they graciously let the world beat them at it.
Never in the field of human conflict.
As much as things have changed, Brits point with pride to their lasting contributions. They gave the world the English language.
Freight for a pound here, lovely libbers. Here we go now.
And Shakespeare.
To be or not to be.
Democracy.
Order! Order!
The royal family. A ready-made and unmissable soap opera.
It has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Afternoon tea.
The finest in Sussex.
And, of course, that most British of characteristics.
The sentries report Zulus to the southwest. Thousands of them.
A stiff upper lip.
So I rest my case, Cokie. Any country that gives the world democracy, you have to consider it the greatest in the world. And how can you knock the British people if they drive on the right-hand side of the road and if they drink warm beer? Well, it's got to be best here. Peter, you can put in a word for America if you wish.
Well, I was just going to say, Charlie, thank you very much. I want people at home to notice that when all three of them have finished their assignments, they're coming back here. There are a lot of people we've met so far around the world today, a lot of people we haven't got to, because the century's changing sometimes even faster than we had anticipated. But there's one person here in New York we wanted you very much to meet. She's here today. Well, she's actually here in New York because she's on Broadway. But she's here in our studio today partly because part of our space here has been devoted to the British Broadcasting Corporation's coverage of the world, and she's sort of their special guest here in the United States. We thought before we met her, some of you in America who don't know her as well would like to see something about her. Dame Edna Everage. Take a look.
We are people. We have our own integrity, and you're not a sex symbol to me, darling. In fact, you actually are a bit of a turn-off. I mean that in a very nice way. I do, because you bring out the maternal instinct in me. And I love that when you parted the Red Sea. Now, a lot of people must have asked you this, but... You're looking at my Red Sea now. You won't be parting that coffin.
Well, that's the alter ego of the Australian actor, writer, and comedian Barry Humphries, and she's here with us this afternoon. Dame Edna, could we have a word with you, please?
Hello, hello.
Oh, my God, what we do for a living. How are you? I'd like...
You're doing wonderfully,
how nice to see you. How nice you... Come up and see...
He's been up for hours, must be 11 hours by now.
Well, I don't even want to look.
And one of the things that's kept this very talented, adorable person going is the soup that I've been bringing you.
Oh, you're so
Special Australian chicken soup. It's emu soup. It's made of those lovely emus. They're protected, so it's very difficult to get.
Yes, I know. You're carrying the Australian national flower. I didn't know that until I knew you.
There they are, and they're for you.
Well, aren't you sweet?
But aren't we sweet, giving up quality time with our loved ones to be on this show?
What do you think of the Millennium?
I'm trying to feel something about it. I have very great difficulties summoning up the right emotion, don't you, possums? Let's be frank. And they're telling us it's not going to happen till next year anyway, really.
I know, the specialists.
And yet, when you show Poland and Stockholm and Sydney, there's a wonderful excitement, and you feel perhaps peace amongst men is a possibility.
Did you get a bit of a touch when you saw the celebrations in Sydney?
I did. A little lump came into my throat.
Yeah.
I think it might have been in the emu soup, but it did come into my throat.
Now listen,
all
you're
the
such a
same.
big star on Broadway. Now come and have a look at Times Square and tell me what you think of all this. You have such a perspective.
I've never seen so many kinds of anorak in my life, have you? And look at this spooky thing that's coming along now.
I think they're celebrating Arabian horses at the moment.
Look, but isn't it nice that Dame Nature has brought the sun out, Peter, shining down on all these very badly dressed people?
Are you having a good time in America?
I am. Look, I feel it's my second home. This is the Australia of the future.
Oh, I'm not touching that one with an 11-foot pole.
Look, they're waving at me. I'm being recognized by them.
Yes, it's fabulous.
They're adorable. And you know, they're orderly. There's no feeling of, well, I haven't seen anyone being sick yet.
But don't you think Americans are better behaved than Australians?
Well, Australians do get a little bit rough, I'm afraid, but that's because we have convict ancestors and it comes out in us sometimes.
Oh, I see, I see. So how are you going to spend the rest of New Year? You're working for the BBC.
I'm going to be sending regular broadcasts about America back to England to let them know how lucky I am.
And give us a clue of what you're telling them.
Well, I'm telling them about what I'm putting into my personal time capsule.
Such
A
as?
lock of my mauve hair, my bridesmaid, Madge.
Your bridesmaid, Madge, is
Yes.
going into the time
She's
capsule.
in the time capsule. She's practically mummified already, Peter.
Right.
And some of my wonderful reviews in the New York papers, too. My scrapbook.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Well, we're just delighted you're here. You have a Millennium message for everybody before we go.
Oh, darling, let me think. Well, my Millennium message might sound a little bit corny, but try to be like me and think more of yourself and less of others. I think that's the message for all of us these days. It's interfering in other people's business that leads to the world's troubles.
Thanks, Dame Edna.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
And keep going, Peter. I'll bring you some more soup. And lots of love, viewers.
Thank you very much. Dame Edna Everidge. They have been fantastically enthusiastic out there in Times Square, particularly those that can see the giant screens here. Throughout the day, and for part of the night as well, we've been trying, as we said before, to take the measure of time, and it's a bit confusing to everybody else. Robert Krulwich was here earlier to explain the 180th meridian, and we have spent quite some time earlier today with Charlie Gibson and others at Greenwich, just southeast of London, because that is the home of the prime meridian, that imaginary line that circles the globe, the south-north mark, marking 0 degrees longitude. So the Greenwich Observatory, the Royal Observatory at Greenwich today, has been extraordinarily important to the whole celebration. And there today, in the spirit of time, the young, quite young, very great singer Charlotte Church sang to the world.
Last night she came to me. She came softly, so softly she came that her feet made no din, and she laid her hand on me, and this she did say. It will not be long, love, till our wedding day.
We find her, I think, in Cardiff in Wales. Charlotte, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't see you yet. How nice to have you with us. You come from a land of great, great singers. Have you had a good New Year's Eve so far?
Yes, so far, everybody in Cardiff here, they've been all fantastic, so, you know, big round of applause for them, and it's lovely to be speaking to you, America. Hi, from all of us here.
I had no idea that you were in front of a live audience in Cardiff tonight. How do you say Happy New Year's in Welsh?
Oh, I don't know. I know how to say Happy Christmas, but I don't, what is it?
Is it Yaki Da?
Moithen Gewitha. Oh, I'm sorry,
speak Welsh, but that's mwy ddengau dda.
No.
Anyway.
Well, it's great to have you, and you're going to give a concert there now, are you? Or are you in the middle of one?
I've just done two songs here for the audience, and if I don't know if your cameras can see, but we have a massive funfair right down there with a big bottle of wine. And afterwards, I'm going to go to a rock band called the Manic Street Preachers. I'm going to go to their concert, and these here are all going to just have fun. So, you know, it's been a great New Year so far, and we've had amazing fireworks display and everything, and bugs, Millennium bugs walking around, so it's been really, really great here in Cardiff so far.
Well, I didn't know you were in front of a live audience. We wish you a happy New Year's. My Welsh is very limited, but I would say to your audience, Yaki da.
Thank you.
That's the Eye in London. By any other name, the Ferris wheel put up to honor the Millennium there. It isn't running yet. There have been some people on board it today, but we don't think it's going to run until tomorrow. Trivia question of the moment. What nationality is the polka? Yeah, a lot of people do say Polish, but let us take you to the capital of the Czech Republic. The Rosamunda polka, or the beer barrel polka in its most well-known 20th century version. It originated in Bohemia, and there, in the heart of Prague tonight, that's how they celebrate the New Year. The Czech Republic, which used to be part of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic and Slovakia now, celebrating in the heart of Prague, which so many of us remember from the late 1960s as the heart of an attempt to get out from under communist rule, home of Charter 77, and now the home of great celebration. Czech Republic tonight. Now, we've been so much in favor of the Millennium, and we know there's some purists out there. Joining us on the phone at the moment is Stephen Jay Gould, the professor of geology and zoology at Harvard University, who wrote a book called Questioning the Millennium, among other things. Professor Gould, are you there?
Yes, Peter.
First of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year on this wonderfully uneventful day.
Thank you very much. Remind people why you felt so moved to write a book Questioning the Millennium.
Simply because so many issues come up that are marvelously unanswerable because calendars are arbitrary human constructions, but that teach us a lot about ourselves because we can get so head up about unanswerable questions, like this great issue of when it's really happening. The 2001 purists are all hung up on the fact that when the current calendar started in the 7th century, there wasn't a zero in Western mathematics, so there was no year zero, and therefore they think the 100th year of every century has to belong to the one before, so 1800 went with the 1700 years, and 2000 is therefore the last year of this century. And in some mathematical sense, of course, that's right. On the other hand, since calendars are arbitrary, if precise constructions, and since ordinary feelings look at 1999 and 2000 and say, hey, that's much more interesting, most people want to celebrate in 2000, and God bless them, they are.
Let me stop you for a second and ask you, because you're widely known as one of the best teachers in the country, both of zoology and geology, and also just of the world in general. Give us, if you would, in a phrase or two, a prediction for the next century.
I'll tell you only one thing. The sun's not going to explode, because that's not going to happen for 5 billion years, and therefore human beings are actually, with our common nature, going to have the potential to work through these environmental, population, and other problems. We have the basic goodness within us, if we can only muster the will. I remain a tragic optimist. I think we may pull through.
Well, we wish you a very happy New Year, and thank you for joining us on this. A Millennium phone call from Stephen Jay Gould from Harvard University, and New York City, he is very proud to proclaim. Oh, what a great picture of St. Basil, where ABC's Mort Dean is standing just outside Red Square. Mort?
Well, Peter, the party has begun. Can you imagine Moscow a party town, and not the kind of party that Lenin and Stalin had in mind? There's quite a party going on. It's quite a day here in Moscow, Peter, as you know. To the surprise of everyone, not only in Moscow but in the world, President Boris Yeltsin announced his resignation today, and the Prime Minister Putin took over, and he is acting president and prime minister as we speak. And he's talking to the nation right now, expressing his hope and expectation that that Moscow will continue on the road to democracy. Fireworks everywhere tonight.
And let's tell people what we're looking at. That's the Kremlin on the right side of your screen. And that to the left is St. Basil's, one of the strangest looking churches or collection of churches anywhere in the world. And there are a lot of people in Red Square, more than you anticipated?
There is a huge crowd here in Red Square, and there is also a huge crowd at Tverskaya Street. There are two big celebrations in Moscow tonight. Everything in Russia is concerned with politics, so there's one party that's being run by the city and another party that's being run by the national government, and that's the one you're looking at right now behind me.
And there you, of course, see the very center of the cathedral that was built in the 16th century by the order of Ivan, sometimes known as Ivan the Terrible. There are actually 9 domes there on the cathedral, and each one a separate church, and there the Kremlin, standing on top of one of Moscow's 7 hills. The sense of history in this place, and very deeply troubled history sometimes, Mort, is extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and I was talking with one of my colleagues and an old friend of yours, our cameraman Max, who just a few moments ago said, never in my life could I imagine that there would be such a wild, wide-open, democratic, free speech kind of celebration as there is tonight here in Moscow.
Midnight in Moscow.
Happy New Year, Peter.
Happy New Year to you, Mort. Many people think this century began with the Bolshevik Revolution, which led to the Russian Revolution, which led to communism, which led to the long phase of animosity between the West and the Soviet Union and its satellites in Europe and elsewhere in the world. It's quite an astonishing sight. Thank you, Mort. Let's go to ABC's Jim Wooten on the Horn of Africa. Hey, Jim, the Russians and Soviets and the Americans and everybody else have fought over that neck of the woods where you're standing now.
That's absolutely true. I was about to say you want some contrast in this broadcast, going from midnight in Moscow to midnight in Aliyadeh. Just listen. There's not a sound here. 11,000 refugees from Somalia have gone to bed, but no particular reason to celebrate. One of the reasons that they don't have anything to celebrate is that all through sub-Saharan Africa, the Cold War, as it existed between the United States and the Soviet Union, changed this continent radically, and not for the better. In Somalia, for instance, which was a Soviet client, you had a great many weapons which were brought in there, planes, small weapons, etc. So now you have a country there that has almost disappeared. That's where these people who are here, and the few who've stayed up with me to more or less celebrate this New Year, can't go back home because their country is a wreck. That's the case all around Africa. It hasn't been a very good century, and I must say that after spending a lot of time here and coming to love Africa, I can't say that the 21st century looks much better.
I was going to say, Jim, that you've done some very eloquent reporting from Africa over the years, and I know you do love it. What's it been like spending the day there, just personally?
Well, it was interesting for me in this particular place. We are about 6 miles from Ethiopia in that direction and about 12 miles in the direction of the camera from Somalia. There are no computers here, there's no online, there's no internet, and just the very fact that we brought in a great amount of gear and equipment to this place today turned into an event of really large proportions. Hundreds of people in the camp came out to see their first television camera. There's no power, no electricity, no plumbing in this place. Our lights are generated, our power is given by a generator. And so even the lights take on a great special meaning for the people here.
Well, Jim, I very much appreciate you being here. I was looking at the number of related deaths in Africa just through war. Since 1974, 5 million people have died there. And as we take one last look, perhaps, at Jim's refugee camp there in Somalia, we're reminded again of one of the great challenges as everybody talks to us about Africa in the new century. The World Health Organization, that 70% of the people who are newly infected with AIDS come from sub-Saharan Africa. Eastern and Southern Africa account for only 4.8% of the world's population, and yet 50% of the people in the world infected with the HIV virus. So, Jim, we thank you, as always, for putting some much-needed perspective into anybody's journalism. Here in Times Square, the country's being celebrated during this hour. It will give you some sense of the enormous number of people around the world participating, no matter which city they are, in Bahrain and Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Georgia, Iran, Iraq, Kenya, Kuwait, Madagascar, Qatar, Russia, of course. We just had midnight in Moscow. Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Tanzania, Uganda, and Yemen. Just 2 hours before midnight in London and the new century there, we go to ABC's Charles Gibson, who is on the Thames. Charles.
Peter, these are the herald trumpets that were aligned along Tower Bridge, and this is the Queen, who is trying to light a laser, which is going to go across the river to light the national beacon on Tower Hill at the London Tower. And I was beginning to worry. This happened just a few seconds ago, and I was beginning to worry. You remember Bess Truman when she was whacking some ship trying to christen it with a bottle of champagne, and the champagne wouldn't break? Well, the Queen couldn't get the laser lit very well either. It took a few moments. I'm not sure actually if the flame was going to light the laser or somebody had a little button that they were going to push to help the Queen out, but it did take forever here a few moments ago. It's going to happen here, I promise you. It did work, finally. I thought the thing at this point was burning up, but indeed she got whatever needed to be lit. And then it seemed to go out. They're explaining to the Queen here what's supposed to happen. Even queens aren't fully apprised of these things. And then there's the laser that goes out, lights the national beacon. And this thing, which is about 30 feet long and about 30 feet high, finally did ignite. As we mentioned a little earlier, there are 300 of these beacons all around England that have been lit at various stages during the day. This by far the largest, and they will burn right up until midnight when they will be extinguished. This is all part of a fundraising effort that's going on throughout Great Britain. And these are live pictures now from the Tower of London, which of course is one of the great tourist attractions in England. We mentioned a little earlier the guards there are dressed like the beefeaters who are so familiar to Americans who happen to catch a glimpse of a gin bottle now and then. And it is, of course, the home of the British Crown Jewels, which is one of the most magnificent, if not the most magnificent, I guess, gathering of jewels in the world. And, of course, the Tower of London had a somewhat sordid past because it was a prison where many British nobility were at various times imprisoned, and various English scoundrels were held there as well.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll come back to you very shortly. It was wonderful to see that beacon there and be reminded of what Prime Minister Blair thinks of as the new sort of relationship between government and private industry, this great beacon of fire, and there on the edge, British gas. Let us go and have a quick look at one of the great historic sites in the world. Let's go to Greece and to the Acropolis. It will be midnight in just a few minutes on the Acropolis, this astonishing site of the Parthenon Temple, built around 457 years before Christ, celebrating their entrance into the new century. What a beautiful picture. ABC's political analyst George Stephanopoulos is, of course, a Greek American and very proud of it. George, a big moment for Greece.
It is. I feel like I'm looking at a piece of home, Peter, and so many of the Greeks who came to America at the turn of this century, earlier in the century, came here for opportunity, but always maintained their roots to that country, both, and it strikes me now as you see the Parthenon, a temple to the Greek gods, the home of the first democracy, but also you're hearing Byzantine hymns, which brings together both the Christian tradition of Greece and the Hellenic classical tradition, something that has been brought to all of the Greeks here in America.
Let's listen. Thank you, George. From the Acropolis in Greece, across the Mediterranean, the eastern end of the Mediterranean, to Bethlehem. ABC's Bill Blakemore is there.
Well, Peter, all the people we've been hearing from for the last few months who've been saying that the world might come to an end at midnight in the Holy Land, we can report that it certainly is not doing that. We have a square that's full of mostly Palestinians from this town. Others are visiting, and they're not waiting for the end of the world. They're in a jubilant mood and celebrating.
Let's listen. Here is the celebration with the doves of peace to mark the new millennium. George Stephanopoulos, another word from you about Greece and Greek American and the new world and the new century?
Well, what I'm thinking about now as we watch it looks like the Acropolis on fire is how the experience of Greek Americans and Italian Americans who came here at the beginning of the century is now being replicated here in America by Dominicans, by people from the East Indies, from these new immigrants are now going along the same path that many of us went through at the beginning of the century, and they're in for an adventure.
And now let's go to Bethlehem again. The Palestinian West Bank town of Bethlehem, the site of the Nativity of Jesus, according to the Gospels. Some people actually hold that he was born in Nazareth. A discussion to be taken up at some other point, of course, but for tonight, this is where the Palestinian Authority wanted the world to be focused on this particular night. Bill Blakemore is there.
Yes, Peter, this has been a night they've been waiting for a long time. They've spent a lot of money to get Bethlehem ready for this particular event. Many people here in the square holding up candles, a scene of enormous hope and pandemonium at the same time, very much like the Middle East. Many of those peace doves a little confused, no doubt, flying in among all of those bursting shells and beautiful colors in the air. But the year 2000 is supposed to be a year of great peacemaking here in the Middle East, with the Israelis, Syrians, and Palestinians all in different peace negotiations. And there is some hope here that by the time this millennium year is over, it will be, as one Israeli said, a very different Middle East, with the Arab-Israeli conflict well towards being something in the past.
But the great news of the day, the big news of the day, has been everywhere, the celebration of a new century. The mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, just told ABC's John Miller a short while ago that in Times Square at this moment, 5:30 Eastern Time in the afternoon, there are as many people as were here for midnight last year. The talk about terrorism in the country over the last several days seems to have dissolved, at least as far as we are in this day, with all the thousands of people who've celebrated here and the people who've celebrated in other parts of the world. Several times today we've tried to give the century some kind of perspective. It's not, of course, just celebratory, and to help us do that again, we're joined by one of the country's most distinguished professors, friend Cornel West, educated in part at Princeton, though teaching at Harvard. Nice to have you here with us.
Happy holidays.
And Happy New Year's to you. When you look back, what's the great moment in the century, if there is one for you?
I think the great moment is actually a process. It's a process of decolonization, when the vast majority of inhabitants on the globe began not simply to fight against colonialism, but most importantly to affirm their sense of self-worth and self-respect. Absolutely right. Because even in this moment of joy and hope, I think it's impossible to talk about joy without talking about misery, because joy is transfigured misery. Similarly, so hope transfigured despair. And you think of the AIDS epidemic right now in Africa that's ravaging that rich continent. You think of oppressed people still struggling, Kurds in Turkey, indigenous peoples in America, and so forth. That even as we celebrate, and we have a right to celebrate, but we have the underside, and that's very important. I think back 1900, Thomas Harding talked about that aged thrust, frail, gaunt, and small, and blast beruffled bloom, who chosen thus to fling his soul upon the growing gloom. We have to have a quest for the best through a wrestling with the worst. And so I think even at this moment, no false securities, no seductive idolatries, struggle for democracy must go on. We would not be here if those were.
Do you find some parallels between now and the beginning of the 20th century? There was this extraordinary optimism then?
Yes, indeed. There's an evasion of the deep problems, the wealth inequality. We've got 3 of the richest human beings in the world who have more wealth than the bottom 48 countries. The top 225 individuals have more wealth than 2.7 billion human beings. Brother Martin Luther King Jr. said we're part of one garment of destiny. We are. We're connected, not just you and I, but you and I with brothers and sisters in Guatemala, in Australia, in Africa, and so forth. And those who died, because we're at the deathbed of a century, not just a celebration of a new one. Those who died, the millions gone, so that we could celebrate, fighting for freedom and democracy. We've got to keep their tradition alive, even as we party tonight.
It's hard to live in America and think that maybe race is the great unfinished piece of business for the country.
I think that's true, but I think when we talk about legacies of white supremacy, it's inseparable from those of male supremacy, it's inseparable from heterosexism, and most importantly, it's inseparable from the increasing economic inequality. And those of us who are fundamentally devoted for living and dying for the best of democracy, we're going to ensure that those folk in the 20th century didn't die for nothing, so we can pass that baton on to the younger generation.
We were just talking between ourselves. Predictions for the next century?
It depends on how courageous we are. It depends on how broad our vision is. And I think that in many ways I would want to call for a new commitment to old challenges, which is let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. If we can live up to that, that takes us back to Jerusalem. Hebrew Scripture, Christian Old Testament. If we can live up to that, then we're in good shape.
Happy New Year.
Thanks so much.
Great to have
Take good care.
Cornel West, professor at Harvard, one of the easiest, one of the best people to be taught by in the whole country. Thank you very much for coming. Now, let's go to Paris.
Well, Peter, what you are hearing is the sounds of people in the street, thousands and thousands of people cheering as the Eiffel Tower is about to be lit with 20,000 different bulbs. People have been lined up there almost as long as they have been in Times Square waiting for it. And now that's a shot of the Champs-Élysées. All of the trees are lit. Ferris wheels just made for tonight. All of the bridges, 35 bridges that connect to the left and the right bank are lit. And now, supposedly this is the countdown to the lighting of the most famous landmark in all of Europe, the Eiffel Tower.
Some things, of course, haven't changed, Barbara, right? I was reading the other day that the population of Paris in 1900 was about 2 million people, and the population today is still only a little over 2 million people in Paris itself. And it is a city that has seen such incredible history.
Here we go, Peter. 20,000 lights from the base of the Eiffel Tower going up 1,000 feet to the top. And in about 2 minutes, the fireworks will start. Those lights are supposed to be climbing up the Eiffel Tower. There they go. It's 1 minute to midnight here, Peter. Climbing 1,000 feet. There is still 1 minute to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Seconds to midnight. We're almost at the top of the tower. 1,000 feet.
Well, we have to give it to Paris. Nobody's done it like that today. And there is Vatican City. Cokie Roberts.
Well, Peter's standing now at his window with the fireworks going off all around him. Is the tiny figure of the Pope, and the crowd here in the St. Peter's Square, as you can hear, very excited to see him there, and also excited that there are fireworks going off all around. But you know, I've been struck. There's the Pope. I've been struck, Peter, in all this today, especially coming from Bethlehem, that this idea of 2,000 years ago, the birth of Jesus, being celebrated still, and being celebrated in all these places you've gone to. The Catholic Church alone now, with 1 billion people, has most of them living in Asia, South America, and Africa, 2/3 of them. So it is an idea that is spread around the globe for 2,000 years.
These are probably the most spectacular fireworks that we have seen, because they have all been choreographed, all different colors, and at the end it's going to be pure white. Now you can see. They spent 3 years planning this.
Now let's go to Berlin. And we'll keep an eye on the Vatican to make sure that we hear the Pope. The Brandenburg Gate. In a unified Berlin. For the first time since the end of World War II.
Sul quadrante della storia scocca un'ora importante. Inizia in questo momento l'anno 2000.
Roy, his name in Polish.
L'anno che si introduce in un nuovo millennio. Per I credenti è l'anno del grande giubileo. Buon anno a tutti voi.
It was so important to this Pope to make it to the millennium. He's 79 years old. He was elected the Bishop of Rome in 1978. Cokie, I went back with him on his first official trip to Poland. He looks so frail now, and as I said earlier, he was so determined to make it here.
And he made it, and he is still determined to make it to the Holy Land in March, and to make it as many places as he can throughout this Jubilee year. He does rally, Peter, for events like this, and what he's doing now is offering prayerful good wishes to the people of the world. It's really a New Year's wish. Now he's singing the song of the very long-standing of wishing. It's a Gregorian chant of wishing you the blessing in the Latin. But his message has essentially just been a message of good, happy New Year's wishes, saying Christ yesterday, today, and forever. To him belong time and the ages. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. And as you can see, this crowd is waited for him happily. He's standing and continued to greet them as they wave these torches, torches that were lit from the Holy Land, and now singing hymns. So it's not the exuberance of Paris, but it is a commemoration of what this 2,000 years is all about.
Thank you, Cokie. That's the Pope and the Papal Apartments. Now let's go back to Paris for their grand finale of their midnight celebration.
Probably the most spectacular fireworks we've seen yet. It is a city absolutely ablaze, and if we sound excited, it's because it's just been, in terms of a celebration, something glorious to see. Paris outdid itself.
Thanks, Barbara. It's a little after 6 o'clock Eastern time now. We've just seen these extraordinary celebrations in France, and this equally moving, but in very different way from Vatican City, thanks to Barbara Walters and Cookie Roberts, who've been there. But we haven't been down actually in Times Square for just a while, and there has not, to the best of our knowledge, been an incident of any magnitude, of any significance in this city or any other to disrupt the celebrations. Oh, there were a few minor things in Sydney, Australia earlier today, largely blamed on the exuberance of the moment. And I guess any of us who've ever come to Times Square know that what you see here are partly New Yorkers, but partly people from everywhere else in the world, because people who come to New York always want to see Times Square. Signs down there wishing Nora happy 2000 in New Mexico. Glad he put up that one. People have come with handmade signs. And somewhere out there, I think, is ABC's Jack Ford.
Peter, in terms of the organizers of this Times Square 2000 event, it has been successful. They are pleased with the people here. The weather has now become somewhat more accommodating than it was this morning. And the folks are sitting here and just waiting for that ball that went up to the top of that shaft at about 7 o'clock this morning and went up to a huge roar, even given the small amount of folks that were here at the time. These people are now waiting patiently for it to drop to the bottom. Peter?
Thanks very much, Jack. And we've moved all across Asia now and across much of Western Europe and through Bethlehem and Cairo and now Berlin and Rome and Paris. London to come, Rio de Janeiro to come, and all of the United States to come. The celebration on the easternmost part of the United States will occur in Newfoundland, and I'm not sure how long that is from now. We're back to London, where they will soon celebrate midnight, and our Charlie Gibson is there as well. Charles?
The estimates of the crowds here along the Thames have been 2 million, 2.5. I don't know. That seems conservative to me, because this celebration, when the fireworks start going off in London, is going to cover a 4-mile stretch of the Thames River, and the crowd is literally 75, 100 deep all along the river. An extraordinary sight is Westminster Bridge. I hope we have a picture of it that you can see, because it is absolutely jammed with people. It is chock-a-block solid with people, and all of the bridges up and down the Thames are the same way, as well as the northern embankment of the river, the southern embankment as well. As we say, the crowds are very thick. The mood is very anticipatory. This should be quite something to see. See the whole scope of the river, because it's like lace as far as you can see. As we said, from the Tower Bridge in the east to Vauxhall Bridge in the west, up and down the river. The only problem in seeing the fireworks is the smoke that comes from the previously exploded charges. Smells like a powder magazine here along the Thames. This is due to go about 15 minutes, Peter, to continue nonstop through that period of time. Oh, New Year's would not be right without a silly hat, so I have brought mine.
I quite agree. I thought you were putting it on to protect yourself from debris.
No, it looks even sillier over this earpiece, but I wouldn't be able to hear you at all if I didn't have these on.
But you want to be reassured that you look silly, do you?
I do.
Yes. Well, I'm sure our time will come at midnight. Charlie, thank you very much.
I'm afraid this picture of me will wind up in the file somewhere, and I'll see it for years.
No, there'll be nothing in the file about it. We'll keep it out and very public. Charlie Gibson.
The smoke is so thick, Peter, that you can barely see the fireworks anymore.
Well, I'm sure we'll be told tomorrow that the river really was on fire, that we just couldn't see it for the smoke. But it is something of a reminder for those people who pay attention to history that in 1900, when Queen Victoria was on the throne, she presided over the largest empire in history. 400 million people, 1/5 the Earth's surface. And now as we come to the end of the century, for all this fantastic show that they put on in Britain, on, around, and under Tower Bridge tonight, Britain's possessions have dwindled to about 15 dependent territories. Hong Kong went back to the Chinese, but the Falkland Islands are still British. And now it has evolved to become the American century. And this is the demonstration of a Labour government in Britain, led by Prime Minister Tony Blair, very much determined, as Charlie said earlier, to reassert itself as a technological, cultural power in the world today. Certainly a mecca, as you see there, for people from all around the world, as is New York. January the 1st, 2000, in London. But you couldn't have a
the birth of the new century, the River of Fire on the Thames, fireworks all over the country. This great stream of high-moving fire going at the speed the earth turns. Difficult to distinguish there, I must admit, from the fireworks. Turning, in theory at any rate, at the very speed of time. This is BBC One. A Happy New Year. What you're seeing now here on the Thames is £1 million worth of fireworks. 29,000 tons of fireworks, the biggest display. But I have to say, as you've no doubt spotted, there didn't appear to be much of that River of Fire. I don't quite know what happened to it. No doubt we shall discover in time. But anyway, this is a spectacular sight. London Eye there with the searchlights going over it. Fireworks running right the way up the river from Tower Bridge to Westminster. And the beacon still burning that the Queen lit earlier.
Happy New Year!
Millennium celebration, end of century celebration, without looking at the magnificent progress and interest and fascination in every respect, mystery to an outsider in many ways, which is Florida. We're going to go to Miami now, where ABC's John Quinones tonight. John, how's the celebration going down there? Actually, we get a bit of a glimpse of it.
As you can tell by the folks behind me, Peter, the fiesta is in full swing here. I am standing right in the heart of South Beach, where throughout the day some 400,000 people have been assembling here to celebrate what they're calling here El Nuevo Milenio, the new millennium. This promises to be one of the biggest beach parties in the country, all celebrated in Latin style. After all, you cannot say Miami and not think Hispanic. Fully 60%, if not more, of the population of the city is now Latino. And for years, Miami has been touted as the city of the 21st century because of its people, an incredible mosaic of faces from Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. Peter?
Quickly, a look at Orlando as well. Well, it's only about 3 minutes before midnight in Brazil, and so we want to go just about as quickly as we can to Copacabana in Rio de Janeiro, where ABC's Bill Redeker is standing by. Bill, the last time we talked to you, the beach was empty. It was a sunny day. Now what has happened?
Well, it's obviously nightfall. The government says there's up to 3 million people here, which is not inconceivable when you consider the length and breadth of this beach, plus Ipanema, plus Laban Beach. You can hear the crowd is starting to go a little bit crazy as we approach the new Millennium. So expect a lot of fireworks in just a moment, Peter.
Bill, we remind people what we told them earlier. We're looking at our little crowd in the largest country in South America with a population of 168 million people. As you've talked to people there today, what are their hopes for the next century?
We just got out in the crowd and talked to a number of people, and they almost all agree that they have to reduce the urban violence here, which is at extreme levels. They have to get the economic engine grinding, and they have to do something about this tremendous destruction to the rainforest. But the number one concern is crime. What they're saying, Peter, is Feliz 2000. Happy New Year. The fireworks have started. It's officially the third or new millennium here in Brazil.
Rio de Janeiro, as it enters the 21st century, country with more Catholics than any other country in the world. And while this millennium celebration may be tinged with Catholicism in some way, there are not many places in the world where they know how to party any better. What a feast this has been today for the mind and for the eye. You're looking at Easter Island, the world's most remote inhabited island, small and volcanic. And just listen to the sweetness of this celebration for a moment. It was a Dutch mariner, Jacob Roggeveen, who first found it, the first European to sight the island. He called it Easter Island to mark the date of his discovery. We try to celebrate the millennium everywhere. Let's go to Washington, D.C. and take one quick look at one of the really, truly beautiful sights at night in America these days. They're working on the Washington Monument, as you know, but when they decided to cover it up, to do the work underneath, they did an absolutely gorgeous job. And there are the people gathering for the celebration on the Mall. The president will be there a little later on with Mrs. Clinton as well. They're celebrating in the White House, and we'll go back to the Mall a little later in the evening. But rarely at night did the Washington Monument ever look as beautiful as this. And now we take you to the very first place in North America to greet the new millennium. Kevin Newman in St. John's, Newfoundland. You are minutes away.
It is almost 12 midnight here in Newfoundland, 1.5 hours ahead of New York time. And we may not have the Eiffel Tower sparkling, and we may not have the Thames aflame, but here in Newfoundland, we're having one heck of a party. And it is very much like the kind of thing that is going on in parks across America, or in this case, a pier. The local people have come down. They've got a great band on stage, and they're just having a great old time, as you can see.
The 21st century has arrived in North America. So many Americans have decided that this was going to be a day to make a particularly spiritual connection. And this is what's happening at the moment inside the National Cathedral. from St. John the Divine, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City, the world's largest cathedral. Not for the first time today do we hear Auld Lang Syne. Began in Scotland with Robert Burns and traveled around the world, and not for the last time we hear it tonight. Awesome. Thank you, Kenny, very much. That was absolutely great. Have a very, very happy New Year. Thank you. We could not gather in Times Square on a New Year's Eve without Dick Clark. And so let's go halfway up the Marriott Hotel across from the ABC studio here to ABC's Dick Clark. Dick?
Thank you, Peter. I see you over in your nice, warm and cozy booth, but it's not bad here this year. I've been out here on some rather cold nights. Tonight, 37 degrees. The weather is clear. There's a light drift of wind in the air, and as you can see, the folks down there are happy. They are ever so happy, and they've been supplied with balloons and wigs and Mylar hats and all sorts of things. Interestingly enough, you at home probably are in the majority this year because they ran a poll recently, and Americans staying home this year are 72%. 72% of the people said they're going to stay home this year, as opposed to 63% last year. This crowd size, as we can see from the 10th floor of the Marriott Marquis Hotel here, is big. They haven't given us the official estimate, but they've said there could be 2 million people in this, the 72-block frozen area between 35th and 59th Streets, between 6th and 8th Avenue. They're cheek to jowl, and they're not cold. They're in a real festive mood. They're ready to go. And if indeed we've got 2 million people here, it will match the crowd when we had the end of the World War II gathering in August of 1945. You were wise to stay at home. In 1 minute, the ball will drop and you will see pandemonium. Listen to him. The ball is beginning to move. They can feel it. They know it. In 47 seconds, it will be 2,000. You're in Times Square with a couple of million intimate friends. 35 seconds. They're ready in 30. Get close to somebody you love. In 25 seconds, it'll be the new year. In 20 seconds. And we're going to count it down from here down when we get to 10. Are you ready? Happy New Year early. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000! looks like a blizzard there. That's 3,500 pounds of confetti being fired by cannons from 13 different locations. Our cameras can hardly see through the paper. Happy New Year! Once again, congratulations to the NYPD. They do an extraordinary job. The city of New York throws the biggest party in the world. It's orderly, it's happy, it's well controlled. Beautiful job. And once again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your New Year's Eve. Peter Jennings, Happy New Year early. I'll see you soon, sir.
Thank you, Dick, very much. Thank you, Dick Clark, very much for a wonderful evening and a wonderful celebration to all of us, not only in New York, but across the country. Dick Clark, without whom we would not want to have a New Year's celebration in Times Square. And sure, those of us who are here are just a little biased as to whether it was the biggest or the best celebration. Wherever you were, we hope it was the biggest and best celebration. People here waited for 19 hours. And hey, listen, this was the way the vote went. Happy New Year to you all across the country and across any other country that happens to be watching us. We had a great time. As I said, they waited 19 hours here in Times Square to share a moment like this, and they waited in every other city in the world to have a happy Millennium moment as well.
She's doing, but she's happy.
Okay, now there we are. The ball is just beginning, Dame Edna. Behind you, if you turn around,
Tell us
we're
what's
seeing
happening.
pictures. The ball is beginning to drop. It takes 60 seconds to go from the top to the bottom. When it reaches the bottom, it will be New Year's Day, the new millennium in New York.
New York, it'll be New Year's Day, Parsons. You've got there already. We're lagging a bit behind, but it's an exciting moment in this city which has taken me to its heart.
They're all giving us a countdown there, Dame Edna. If you could help them along for us.
Yes, let's all count down now, Parsons. Are you ready? Millennium, 8, New York City.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Happy New Year! And there's the ticker tape.
You were talking about the ticker tape.
Look
You've got it
at
now,
that.
Mummy!
How is your mother, Dame Edna?
Brian,
Happy New Year, Gabby!
Right, Happy New Year, Dame
Happy
Edna.
New Year.
Brian, what's it like out there on the street?
All around us, and the dam has burst. They're delirious. They're over the top.
Wow.
It's a pretty good sight. It's been a long wait because we were all rather envious of what you guys had over in Europe, but this is pretty tremendous as I stand here. This is an absolute New York-style ticket.
It's been worth the wait. It looks absolutely magnificent.
I think so. I was rather. Well worth the money, I'd say.
How much money did it cost? Do we know?
No, I'm sure Mayor Rudy Giuliani's budget is pretty flush with all those tax dollars from the Wall Street boom.
Absolutely.
So I don't think anyone's worried about that.
We're just getting the pictures now of New York as they enter the new millennium. The ticker tape parade, the ball has dropped. There's a huge 2000 lit up, more fireworks, absolutely incredible, as only the Americans could.
Well, this is the heart of show business after all. This is the Broadway Theatre District. And Broadway itself, the Great White Way, has never had a better year than it's had with all the musicals that are running here. So this is a show business extravaganza.
But for the moment, let's share a little bit of the celebration on the Mall in Washington. President Clinton showed up, as we know, some time ago. And as they celebrated the millennium, he invoked the words of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, "Let freedom ring," and this is what it looked like. ABC Sam Donaldson is at our Y2K government headquarters in Washington. Sam, what have you been seeing, if anything?
Well, Peter, it's like the firefighters are sitting around the station house and playing a pinochle, waiting for the bell to ring. It never rings. Every place that they've checked here at the Information Center in Washington, beginning with New Zealand, ending now with New York, Washington, the Eastern Seacoast, everything's fine. The federal government spent $8.5 billion. They estimate about $100 billion, Peter, spent by private industry in this country. So if people say, well, was this a hoax? Was this a hype? No, probably we're going to find out there was a real problem there, but they got it fixed. And this may be one of the great success stories of how, yes, indeed, people can fix a problem once they identify it.
Sam, thank you very much. And we're very happy to include in our Millennium phone call list one of America's best-loved actors, Alan Alda, who has spent the evening with his family and friends at his home in Bridgehampton, New York. Hi, Alan.
Hello, Peter.
Happy New Year to you, first of all.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
And how did you spend the evening? Who all was there?
Well, we spent it with you. We had you projected on the wall above our fireplace. Your face was about 4 feet tall.
Well, I know you're very, very family-oriented. Did you have your kids and your grandchildren there?
Yes. When the ball landed on the building, I was dancing with my 2.5-year-old granddaughter. It was a wonderful evening.
Well, that's fantastic. Alan, you're one of the people who's had such a wonderful interest in the world. As you look back over almost any period of time you choose, what rushes to mind, if anything?
It's an interesting question to me because tonight we played a game where we were trying to figure out the greatest inventions in the last 2,000 years. And you almost can't name any single one, except what your show has been doing all day long and will do through the night is an example of one of the most remarkable things that's happened, I think, and that's this the convergence of abilities to communicate globally. You could communicate at the speed of a horse 200 years ago, and now it's at the speed of light.
As you were sitting with your friends tonight, were you making New Year's resolutions?
Nobody seems to have made one. That seems to be probably have grown a great deal in the past 1,000 years if nobody made one tonight.
I agree. Well, thank you for staying up and talking to us. Alan Alda.
Great to talk. You're doing a great job.
New Year's. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year.
There are celebrations to come in New Orleans and Chicago, which are our next midnights, and so we're going to go first to New Orleans and Steve Osunsami. Steve?
Well, Peter, we're right now in Jackson Square, which is just about a block away from the Mississippi River, which means so much to this town. And although a large part of the country has already marked the beginning of the special new year, there is no sense here that the celebration that is about to really kick off in 5 minutes is anticlimactic. The smell of cigars is in the air. There are at least 1,000 or so people in this one area alone. And for further proof, take a look at the stage. There's plenty of music going on, and it's very colorful, and people here are as happy as ever to welcome the new year, especially this new year. And I think that was illustrated today by all the different processions through the streets, all the people who have come into the French Quarter just to mark this special occasion.
Thanks very much, Steve Osunsami. Welcome back to New Orleans. As we've celebrated the world today, we have all been very conscious of the fact that so many of the people from elsewhere in the world are represented in the great Midwestern city of Chicago. And there we find Carol Simpson. Carol?
I'm very envious of Steve Osunsami down in New Orleans, where it looked rather warm. I am in the Windy City in Grant Park in downtown Chicago. Beautiful skyline. I'm feeling the power. Let me show you something. Just watch what will happen. All you have to do is wave your hand and the crowd goes wild. And today we've been talking about how diverse the city is. And if you look at the crowd, you see the diversity of Chicago. There are Asians, there are Poles, there are Jews, there are African Americans. They're very happy ones that this is finally their time. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay! Happy New Year to you, Carol.
Thank you, Chicago, and Happy New Year's to all of you out there. Let's go now to join briefly the celebration in Mexico City.
Con jazmines y flores, este día voy a adornar. Hoy por ser nuevo milenio, venimos a
cantar. New Orleans celebration of midnight is well underway. Much of this day has been celebrated with music in America.
Nashville, say hello to everyone from around the world.
ABC's Bob Brown.
Here we go.
As they gathered across the U.S. to celebrate New Year's Eve was a textbook lesson in how and why American music had dominated the last century of the millennium, by taking in the influence of the cultures that came to the U.S. and making its own unique sound. In Nashville, where country music grew into a phenomenon out of ballads brought from the British Isles, Faith Hill showed how much of it has now been fused with pop.
Centrifugal emotion, it's perpetual radius, it's that pivotal moment, it's impossible, this kiss, unstoppable.
Good evening, everyone. This night isn't just another New Year's Eve, so happy millennium, everyone. May all your dreams come true. Let me take you.
As for show people who knew show business, Barry Manilow, a performer who did much of his own arranging, used huge orchestrations to carry the casino crowd in Connecticut. Billy Joel, in many ways a chronicler of life late in the 20th century through his lyrics, was at Madison Square Garden, New York. He was impressed by the show the rest of the world had put on.
Just seeing this whole thing happen around the world has been very moving. Watching all these other countries celebrate the passing of the millennium and realizing how we're all tied in with each other.
I'll meet you anytime you want in our Italian restaurant. Things are falling down on me, and things I could not see.
A group called Fish, with an enormous cult following, played a marathon engagement at Big Cypress Seminole Indian Reservation in Florida.
When I tried to stay aside, I moved to where they'd hoped I'd be.
Australian though they may be, the Bee Gees picked up the baton for disco on New Year's Eve.
My woman keep me warm. What you doing in your back? Huh? What you doing in your back? You should be dancing, yeah. Dancing, yeah. Might as well stop the rain. Stand in the track of a runaway train.
Bonnie Raitt in San Rafael, California, due to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Don't worry, babe, 'cause I ain't nothing new. That's just love sneaking up on you. Don't hang up the phone now. Trying to figure out just what to do. I'm going crazy.
Teenage vocal groups have always thrived since the advent of rock and roll. One of the more popular, In Sync, performed in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah, so tell me what to do now when I want you back. Wanna live this life forever.
Enrique Iglesias demonstrated the growing influence of Latin music in the U.S. as the century drew to an end. And in New York City, where the tunes of great Jewish pop composers could literally be heard from the windows of Tin Pan Alley early in the century, that tradition of picking up music off the streets was alive and well.
It's New York. Hello, it's New York.
Spank is what this group called itself, a little rhythm, a little harmony, the American belief that nothing's impossible in music,
I can't fake it.
and everyone's invited.
You see, I can't fake it. I got to be real. It's New York.
Those all-encompassing ideals of America are what Neil Diamond sang about as he counted down to the new millennium in Denver.
Everywhere around the world, they come into America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come into America. Got a dream to take them there. They come into America. Got a dream they come to share. They come into America. They come into America. They come into America. They come into America. They come into America today, yes. Today, yes. Today, yes. Today, yes. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Midnight in the Rocky Mountains, and Happy New Year to everybody in the Rockies. Neil Diamond speaking in the heart of Denver and carrying us into yet another midnight. We're coming up now to the edge of the Pacific Ocean from the United States at this hour. And throughout this journey today, we have seen and tried to get very close to people's hearts. And here is something else that we managed to get put together. This is called the Global Heartbeat Project. to Las Vegas to look at the dancing fountains. ABC's Connie Chung.
Peter, I know you think you're looking at Paris, but you're not. That's the Paris Hotel. It's the Eiffel Tower that isn't real, but it's very close. At 3 minutes to midnight, if all goes well here, we will see a human ball drop. Take that, Times Square. It's behind me at the top of Las Vegas's Eiffel Tower. Dancers and rock climbers will be hanging from 100-foot ropes just below the observation deck. And they're going to perform a 3-minute dance accompanied by a song from the French pop rock musical Notre Dame de Paris. Now, Amelia Rudolph is the choreographer, and she is mic'd up and she can talk to me. Amelia, can you hear me?
I can just barely hear you, Connie, but I heard you ask me that question.
All right. Amelia, can you describe exactly what you're going to do?
I'll let you know that we're up here on the Eiffel Tower, enjoying ourselves. I'm springing off the Eiffel Tower to enjoy the evening, trying to warm up again.
They're still rehearsing. They're going to do it, they think, at midnight tonight. And at the end, there's going to be mylar balloons and confetti that will emerge from the top of the Eiffel Tower. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Connie, very much. There's another one of the extraordinary sight. There's a helicopter done high over Las Vegas. If my email is any example today, we've all learned a little bit of something from somewhere to gather with us along the way. I think many of us did know going into this that the Native American population hovered around 1%, but I never knew until Barry Serafin went out to thunder in the desert that the United States government recognizes 557 Indian tribes in the country, a great many of which are in Alaska. Many of those tribes have gathered in Tucson, out in the Midwest, out in the West today to celebrate Thunder in the Desert, and Barry Serafin is still there. Barry?
This is a traditional round dance, and everybody is invited in, native and non-native. This is a dance which is meant to signify unity and happiness and healing and setting aside bad things. It's a dance that traditionally happens about this time of the year every year. But this, as you can see, is quite an event. Literally hundreds of people moving around in this big circle out here, native and non-native.
Barry, how far are you from the circle?
Well, I'm about 15 feet away, Peter.
Well, you're a man of the West. Are you on a wireless microphone? Why don't you go and join us and talk us through?
Well, I've actually been invited to
join
in this dance, and I may do it once I'm off camera tonight.
No, why don't you? All right, I won't force you to do it. But there is a wonderful, wonderful simplicity about seeing this in Tucson, Arizona tonight, which reminds us, as I think people at home are probably reminded, a lot of people wanted to be together on this particular New Year's Eve and wanted to share a more intimate experience, and I don't think we have seen one anywhere in the world today that has been more intimate and simpler than this one. Thanks, Barry Serafin in Tucson, Arizona. Please join the round dance. Union Square in San Francisco. To Los Angeles, lest we forget, the lighting of the Hollywood sign. The Hollywood sign is back. Well, our broadcast is coming to an end. Just before we leave, some absolutely unplanned, unrehearsed comments. I feel a little bit, as I think a lot of us do, like the people who were entering the 20th century 100 years ago with great fascination that we were on the edge of the unknown, and because there was so much yet to be known, a real hunger to know more. and a certain trepidation. They were coming into the technological age, and we now go into a new technological age. There'll be lots of time in the days ahead to revisit all of the commentary that has been offered up about the millennium in the last several days and weeks and months. I remind myself of only one thing at the end of this thing, and it's what one of our great futurists, we do have futurists, you know, at the end of the 20th century said, remember, when you put the known and the unknown into a computer, the unpredictable always outweighs the predictable. So the future is exciting and it is uncertain. Thank you very much for joining us for this broadcast. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night from Times Square.
ABCnews.com, the first place for news online. Get your news first from ABCnews.com, now a part of the Go Network.
As the fireworks dissolved, lights dimmed, and the people of the world ended their celebrations ushering in a new millennium, there is still one place on Earth where the celebration will continue for another year. Centered in Epcot at the Walt Disney World Resort near Orlando, Florida, the year-long Millennium celebration will light up the faces and touch the hearts of family and friends. Every day until New Year's 2001, families from around the world are coming to Walt Disney World to mark this special moment in a global celebration. Complementing the celebration are new attractions and rides designed to spark the imaginations of guests. At Millennium Village, the cultures of the world are all gathered to celebrate their diversity and to remind us how alike we all are. Every day around World Showcase Lagoon, over 2,000 singers, dancers, and giant puppets perform a tapestry of nations. Soaring nearly 20 feet tall, these enormous figures dramatically represent all regions of the world. Illuminations 2000, Reflections of Earth, lights up the sky each night with breakthrough technologies and the world's first Earth globe, nearly 3 stories tall. Nearby all this heart-pounding celebration is a way to leave your personal mark, an image on a monument to tell future generations that you were here with cherished friends and family to celebrate the future hand in hand. With something new in every corner of our world, the 4 theme parks at Walt Disney World offer something for everyone. For more information on the year-long Walt Disney World Millennium Celebration, call 407-WDisney.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.